Hello
Hello
there.
there.
Welcome back to Star Wars in a Galaxy. Watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. I'm Jacob.
I'm Eli.
Today we are coming at you with episode number 118 of our podcast, continuing our chronological rewatch of all things Star Wars. Today we're going to be taking a look at the last 47 minutes of Solo, a Star Wars story, going from right about the prison break on Kessel right through the end of the movie. Very exciting. Eli, anything else to say before we hop into this one?
No, I'm really excited to get to this last 47 minutes of the episode, and yeah.
Yeah, this is a big section, so bear with me while I summarize. The prison break, or I guess it's not really a prison break. The enslaved miners successfully break free during this mine riot, and the crew does get off Kessel with all the coaxium. However, L337 is destroyed in the process. The Falcon runs into an Imperial blockade in the Kessel Run on the way back, and so Han flies into the Maelstrom to get the coaxium to Savareen on time and to evade the Imperials. He's pursued by TIE fighters. They successfully shake off the Empire, and they connect L3's brain and navigation into the Millennium Falcon in order to help them navigate their way out. However, while they are flying towards the Maw, this gravity well, they are attacked by a giant tentacled space monster that I'm not sure the name of.
I got you there if you want.
Yeah, here, hit me.
The Summa Verminoth.
The Summa Verminoth. Okay. They're
The Summa
attacked by the
Verminoth.
Summa Verminoth, and they escape by injecting a little bit of coaxium into the Millennium Falcon's reactor core, and they make it to Savareen. Back on Savareen, they successfully, not back, they haven't been there before, but they made it to Savareen, and they successfully begin to refine the coaxium. And Han and Qi'ra even have a little talk about their future, which we will talk about. However, Enfys Nest and the Cloud Riders show up. They corner Han, Beckett, and the crew. Enfys reveals the true history and mission of the Cloud Riders, that they are all people whose worlds were hurt or oppressed or looted. They're all people who were hurt in some way by the Black Sun, or no, the Crimson Dawn, sorry, by the Crimson Dawn. And it is their mission,
By any crime syndicate,
yeah,
by
or
the
any
crime
crime,
any
who
crime
was hurt by
syndicate,
a
the
crime
Empire.
syndicate, or the Empire. And their mission is to take down crime syndicates and the Empire and start a rebellion. And so that is why they need the coaxium to finance their operations. Han comes up with a plan to help defeat the Crimson Dawn alongside the Cloud Riders. However, Beckett decides to leave instead. So Han and Qi'ra deliver the coaxium to Dryden Voss's yacht, which arrives on Savareen. However, Dryden reveals that he knows that the coaxium that they're giving him is fake, that Beckett told him about their scheme. It is revealed that Beckett, in fact, became an informer for Dryden Voss in exchange for his own benefit. However, at the refinery, the Crimson Dawn enforcers discover that Enfys also had decoy coaxium, and there were decoy Cloud Riders. The real Cloud Riders pop out of hiding and defeat Dryden's soldiers. So back on the yacht, Beckett kills Dryden's guards and leaves with Chewbacca and the coaxium, which is actually the real coaxium, leaving Han, Qi'ra, and Dryden to fight it out. Qi'ra disarms Han and is about to strike him down, but then she attacks Dryden instead and kills him. Han goes after Chewbacca, and Qi'ra hologram calls none other than Darth Maul, telling him that it was Beckett who was responsible for murdering Dryden Voss. Han finds Beckett and Chewbacca, and after a brief conversation standoff, he kills Beckett. But after he does that, he sees that Dryden Voss's yacht is leaving, and Dryden's yacht flies away, with Qi'ra piloting it on board, meaning that Qi'ra has decided to leave Han behind and embrace the life of a crime syndicate leader. Later on, Han finds Lando again, and he pickpockets the secret card in his sleeve, then challenges him to a rematch in Sabacc, and successfully wins himself the Millennium Falcon. And that is this segment of Solo. That is everything we have to cover today.
Yep. And he takes off in the Falcon in search of a pretty big gangster that Beckett was telling him about Big Shot Gangster
Putting together a
on
crew.
on Tatooine, which is I don't know who that is, but yeah, we got a lot to cover in this. We got a lot to cover in this. This is I forgot how good this portion is. There's some stuff. We'll get to this later on. There's some stuff I have some problems with in this portion, but there's more stuff that I loved in this than I thought there was. Honestly, let's go with. What do you want to get to first?
I guess we could just start at the prison break.
Yeah,
I guess, or
we already
breakout
did a
on
bunch of that
Kessel.
with Buck last week.
I guess then L3, the demise of L3, the quote unquote death of L3. She's trying to lead this rebellion and she gets cut down by some blasters.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? Because for me, it wasn't a very impactful moment. I'm not sure exactly what the intention was behind it. Obviously,
I think
leading to maybe you have more to say.
I think it was the intention was L3 to get L3 into the Falcon, basically. Yeah. And I knew that moment specifically had a lot of controversy around it because of L3's role as a very liberationist leader. And often because Phoebe Waller-Bridge is such a feminist at her core, and L3 reflected that, I knew that there was controversy around it. And so I wanted to make sure we covered all our bases. I wanted to get somebody who identified as a woman, their perspective on this controversy, because there are certain parts I like about this plot point, and there are certain parts I definitely don't. And this person's opinion and the very long Twitter DM they wrote me, which again, I'll credit them very soon. And I thank them greatly for this. It aligns with my own view of this. I reached out to a friend of the show, co-host of Sistas with Sabers, Em, formerly of Pink Milk, because she's a very intelligent person, and I wanted to get her view as a woman of L3's
untimely demise.
Insertion into the Falcon. Yeah. And here's what she said to me. Let's begin by stating something perhaps obvious but central to the issue. Female agency as a concept is something that feels especially pressing and sensitive. Very generally speaking, humanity is engaging in a push and pull of leaving overt patriarchal structures behind and trying to uproot more subtle and entrenched ones with varying success across nations and cultures. The importance of agency of women cannot be understated. As a white person, I can only speak to Western Enlightenment-based culture, so I will do so now. Stories don't only lie in front of us on screens and pages, they also follow us. Women in my position have a legacy of being told by our mothers about times when women weren't allowed to open a credit card without their husband's permission, for example. Having the freedom to go where we want and be and do what we want is a new thing to us and possibly fragile. This fragility has especially been driven home by the rolling back of reproductive rights in the developed world. This sounds like serious talk that is out of place when we're discussing something that's fake into space, but the point is that it's something that's at the forefront of many women's minds, and that explains why we get so heated about it. Seeing a character who is portrayed as a freedom fighter, feisty and triumphant at the Spice Vines, the kind of character our mother's feminism taught us was the ideal, being imprisoned, was a blow. The obvious cues that we were supposed to see this as a quote-unquote win, two beloved machines becoming one, was the kick in the kidneys. The writers and director could have had the upload be L3's idea. They could have even had her link herself to the Falcon navigation system willingly. Earlier in the film, while she was conscious, and she explained something about how much fun it was, but they didn't. It wasn't a consideration at all, and that is the problem. We're coming out of a long era where no one cared about what women wanted for themselves, and if they did, it was an afterthought. Seeing that play out on screen was a chilling reminder, and seeing it happen so blatantly to a character who was explicitly coded as liberationist, in parentheses, feminist, made it feel like she was being punished and tamed. don't think that the more affectionate ways of viewing the story are lost on us. It is very romantic and perhaps even heartwarming to think of L3 getting to have a different kind of freedom while roaming the galaxies, seeing more things than she knew existed, getting some kisses from Minox. It gives you that warm feeling that backstory sometimes does, to think that the Falcon that we met in New Hope came preloaded with the consciousness of a brave and loyal friend. What should have been her choice. And when you're in a group that could historically be given a perfectly nice life that you never asked for, we understand that sting. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I completely agree with Em in this, and I thank her very greatly. Go follow her on Twitter at Hutslaya. We'll link Sisters with Sabers down in the description. I literally contacted her about this yesterday, and she was very kind to get back to me very quickly about it. I completely agree with her. That was the struggle I had. That's why I wanted to get a woman's perspective on this specifically, because I like the idea of L3 being in the Falcon. I think that's a really fun idea, with the whole this ship uses a very peculiar dialect moment in Empire, and I think it melds in with the original trilogy very well. But I also understand how, for a character that was so adamant about freedom and liberation, to end up like that, not of her own volition. And I think that's the part I was missing. I was like, how do we reconcile these two things? Well, we make it of her own volition, like Em said. We make it so that L3 is the one who's, no, you got to do this. I'll be willing to help. And that's how you do it. You make it of her own volition. You don't just make it so they do it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, shout out to Em. Thank you so much for that. Shout out to Sisters with Sabers. Go check them out. Awesome podcast. Awesome crew over there.
Absolutely.
I think that Em brings up a lot of really good points and things that I honestly, Solo is not one of the movies that I'm the most familiar with. In terms of, I think I hadn't watched it since maybe 2019. I was not aware of the controversy really, and this was not something that I had considered. But this makes a ton of sense, and I can absolutely see how this is upsetting, feels bad, is problematic. I think something that's great about Star Wars is that different people, depending on who you are, depending on not just your identity, but depending on who you are as a person, depending on your life experiences, there's different people that you identify with. There's different characters that I specifically identify with or feel kinship with than you do, Eli, or Em does, or anyone else. And I think I understand how, when one of those characters who feels important and who feels like L337 in this movie, it does feel like, with the way that she is coded and the way that she is written, she's more than just a droid in Star Wars. And I think to see that kind of come to an end, that is in some ways could be seen and can be very reasonably seen as antithetical to what she really stood for, which was liberation, projecting onto feminism in our world, everything that she said about droids, and then without her input, without her being a part of it, just being in one way, you could say, just confined to the Falcon. That's upsetting, and that's sad, and that's not something that anyone really wants to see for this character who sees or appreciates these things in this character. So I think what Em said was extremely on the point and really helped me realize, because I was like, controversy? What controversy? Because I wasn't up on the dialogue surrounding this. So I absolutely agree. And also I just think that there didn't really, it felt like, yeah, sure, you had the maw, it happened when it did because of the structure of the story, but really I think L3 could have been a bigger part of the story, potentially. She didn't need to necessarily die at this point.
Die off at that point. No, I agree with that.
Like, there could have been more, I think.
Yeah, no, this is a part of the story. Like, the Kessel Run overall is one of my favorite sequences of this film, not including that. But here's the thing, if you remove that, the sequence doesn't really change that much. Yeah.
And I think that she's part of the ship now. That moment, I think it's a poignant moment in many ways. And in many ways, it's a poignant moment and a nice kind of wrapping up of L3's story. But as Em said as well, it also leaves a lot to be desired. And I do think that they could have done something more.
But right, yeah, but that was what Em said, and I thank her very much for contributing that to us.
Thank you to Em.
Yeah.
Big shout out to Sisters with Sabers.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Great podcast over there.
Yeah. I want to talk about the Sim of Verminoth.
About what?
The Sim of Verminoth.
Okay, what do you have in mind?
I love the Sim of Verminoth is one of my favorite Star Wars creatures, specifically because, so we first, of course, saw it in Solo, but it's also part of one of my favorite comic arcs of all time. It is part of the second arc of the Darth Vader comic in 2020, with Darth Vader and everybody's favorite murderous assassin boy,
no.
Ochi of Bestoon, baby.
Man, you and your Ochi of Bestoon.
No, listen to me.
Problem.
Okay. This is the literal part of this arc. Literally,
I know.
The second to last issue of the arc is Vader and Ochi flying in Vader's TIE fighter through the red honeycomb zone that we see in Rise of Skywalker to get to Exegol.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
What's guarding Exegol?
The Seminar of Verminoth.
A Sim of Verminoth. And you know what Vader does?
What a mouthful of a name.
And you know what Vader does?
What does Vader do?
He fights off the Sim of Verminoth single-handedly.
That's just... I feel like the comics sometimes go a little overboard on Darth Vader. I've read quite a few comics. That's just... I don't know. So, like, a whole comic collection's worth of just Darth Vader being badass and doing ridiculous stuff.
It's not that simple. I'll say it's not that simple. I think this Suma Verminoth.
I haven't read this one to be specific, but
I think this specific Suma Verminoth also was connected in some way to the dark side power of Exegol. So it was also like planting weird visions in Vader's head. And I don't think Vader actually killed the Suma Verminoth. I think he just fended it off and then made his way down to the surface of Exegol.
Yeah, maybe I'm just wary of comics with Darth Vader in them at this point. We've had so many.
We have.
Between the EU comics and now all these new Legends comics have just been... I've just read one too many comics of just basically just Darth Vader soloing whoever to the point where it's no longer
Greg Pak's Vader comic is damn good though. The first arc brings back Sabe and the Handmaidens and confronts Vader's ever-changing legacy about Padme, and then we get Ochi of Bestoon and Sith stuff, and then we get some other weird stuff where Darth Vader loses control of the Force. Shout out to Greg Pak, shout out to the Darth Vader comics. You're number one fan. This is Stan. I know. Yeah, I'll just say that the escape from the Maw and the escape from the Maelstrom, I think just looks beautiful. I think the VFX department did their damnedest with this, honestly.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. It is a pretty thrilling sequence. I'll give you that.
I think it looks beautiful, and I think that, and originally this was my favorite sequence in this entire film, which it's not anymore, but everything that I glossed over this because we were earlier because we were talking about L3, but everything that happens in the escape is just so, like, all the OT callbacks, the Imperial Star Destroyer, musical cue, like Lando using the word rebellion. We're now in what I'd call the OT era. I think now we can't pretend we're in that transition period anymore. We are in the OT era. We're using these terms: rebellion, empire. The stormtroopers are the bad guys. The rebels are the good guys. That is the era that we are in.
I also love, in terms of, it's not necessarily a reference or a callback or something like that in specific, but just Han's little pause and that big grin he has as he sits down at the controls of the Falcon.
Oh, beautiful.
It's beautiful. And what is it? The asteroid belt.
The asteroid field interpolation is fantastic.
The asteroid field motif is amazing.
That moment where Chewie sits down in the co-pilot seat with Han's Star Wars theme blaring in the background. That's movie magic, baby. That's what that is. That is movie magic right there.
I'm a sucker for that stuff.
I am too. It's holy shit. Also, just another line that again, Kasdan hits the spot with lines that sound like Han Solo to me. Look, I know these guys. I used to be one of them. There's no way they're gonna waste a TIE fighter chasing down a little rink-eating freighter.
Yeah.
Immediately, TIE fighters soar out.
Yeah, I love Han's just ridiculous throughout this movie, just his ridiculous, unwarranted confidence, just trying to bluff his way through.
Han is doing the verbal version of this face, the shrug face he makes in front of the Endor bunker. Yeah. The entire film. That's what he's doing.
Absolutely. Let's see what else.
I'll also say that, of course, you know what Han does right before making this insane run through Castle Run? You know what he says, right?
What does he say?
I got a really good feeling about this. Which I actually really, of course, it's a fun Easter egg. It's also like one of the first times, like it was Rogue One and then Last Jedi and then Solo now, that's putting a twist on the I have a bad feeling about this statement because they know fans are looking for it. But I like this one specifically because, of course, Han says the bad version. How many times does Han say, I have a bad feeling about this?
More than that, I think.
It's 3 times. New Hope, Return of the Jedi, Force Awakens. And of course, they're all after this. So Han's saying good feeling now, and then he gets his heart broken by Qi'ra. Then he gets more cynical progressively. Like even New Hope, Return of the Jedi, even Force Awakens, he's still more of a good person. Like in Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens at the end of this, than he was like in New Hope, but like he's still been scarred by those events that have happened to him when he was a young man. And I like that we get to have Han have a little optimism here before it turned into, even with the optimism he gains later on, this like deep brooding, like, I don't think so, kid.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the usage of I have a good feeling about this here is really interesting.
I think one thing this movie does well that I appreciate more now that we're dissecting it, I think, is sowing the seeds of who Han is going to be, showing us this version of Han. We see flashes of who he will become, the kind of the Han we meet again in A New Hope, but also it shows this different version of Han and kind of some things that happen that start to put him on this trajectory. But also it leaves us wondering a little bit as well, I think.
Yeah, and we'll get to leaving us wondering a little bit later. I will also say that I know that according to Pablo Hidalgo, this is the fucking craziest coincidence of all time, because of course the move that Han does where with the Falcon where he bats that TIE fighter off.
Yeah.
You will remember that there was a similar move done by a pilot of a freighter in a Star Wars story released very close to that point. Actually, I think a few months earlier, which is that Hera pulls a very similar move in The Ghost in season 4 of Star Wars Rebels. Pablo Hidalgo claims, and of course I believe him on this one, that those moves were developed entirely separately from each other. It's a complete coincidence that they both happened at the same time.
Interesting.
That there was no planning on that part, even though they came out within months of each other, that it just happened that way, which I totally believe. It seems like an interesting enough idea that multiple people could have come up with it. That both Dave and John could have, both Dave Filoni and John Kasdan or Lawrence Kasdan or any of the other writers, Matt McNevitz, Gary Whitta on Rebel Season 4, could come up with it. I will say, I want to know your opinion about this, but for me, actually, I'll ask you this first. Which one do you like better?
Being a Rebels guy, I gotta go with Hera's in Rebels, but this one was cool as well. I thought it was a fun part of the action.
In all other circumstances, I would agree with you, but I will say I like Rebels Season 4 more than I like Solo. I like Hera more than Han as a character. But God, the flip of the TIE fighter down just feels like such a Han move.
Yeah,
that like
it is.
I gotta give the points to Han here, although
Fair
that
enough.
doesn't
Fair enough.
that I'm far from hating Hera's. I love that Hera used it too, because she also seems like a character that would use it, but Han, I feel, is the quintessential character that would use something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else about this section before we move on to Savareen?
Oh yeah, one more thing. One more thing. Actually, I'm sorry, a few more things. First of all, I just want to mention this. A little something I picked up from my pal Needles, best street racer in Corellia, till he crashed and died doing this. The landing gear skim on the asteroid picking up is again another
what a sequence.
Only something that only Han motherfucking Solo could do.
Oh yeah.
It's just batshit crazy. And I love it so much. And then one final thing that I will tell you about what are my feelings about the Kessel Run, which is that line, of course. Hey Chewie, how do you know how to fly like that? 190 years old. Wow, you look great.
Yeah.
Which is a fun line, but it reveals a tiny bit of a contradiction in Star Wars.
Oh, actually. Really?
Not from this movie. This film claims that at that time, Chewbacca was 190 years old, which means he would be born in about 200 BBY, right?
Yeah.
Then Poe says in The Rise of Skywalker, Chewbacca, aren't you 250 years old? If we measure the distance of time from Solo to The Rise of Skywalker, it's a difference of 44 years. But the gap in ages is 60 years. So, of course, we get to the question. How old is Chewbacca really?
I think I would very much trust Chewbacca's word over Poe. He could have been exaggerating. He could have gotten it wrong. There's many reasons why we don't necessarily think that's a continuity error, and rather just Poe being Poe.
Yeah, that is what that is the conclusion I drew, which is that because it is from Chewbacca's own word, that Poe was rounding or making an exaggeration or something like that. And because Solo, and not that this is ironclad proof, but it also helps that Solo did it first. Solo delivered the information first. And like that specific line was in the marketing for that movie. So yeah, as much as I love Rise, and I do much more than Solo actually as a film, but I think Solo has this one. Again, this is like the nerdiest of conversations ever. Don't get me wrong, but I did want to bring that up because there was this came up as a controversy in an episode of Epic Confrontations a while back, and I remember it very vividly because we couldn't really figure it out, and I wanted to address that here.
One thing I liked about this entire sequence with, excuse me, still chasing off a bit of cold, with the Maw, the Kessel Run, the TIE fighters, we knew 100% that Han was going to be okay, that everyone was going to be okay. And yet it still felt thrilling, even on the rewatch.
Oh, yeah.
The entire sequence with Beckett scrambling to get the coaxium and the little syringe, getting thrown around the ship, trying to inject it. Genuinely exciting, genuinely well done. And I salute Solo for that, because it's not necessarily easy to do with in some ways you have the curse of the prequel where, we know where these characters are going to end up. So we have to find a different way to put the stakes in there, because we know Han's going to be okay. We know Chewbacca is going to be okay. We know Lando is going to be okay. How do the filmmakers, the writers work around that? So I appreciated that they managed to put this in and still have me on the edge of my seat.
It's an incredible action sequence, and I think it was just done really well. For something that we knew was going to happen in this film, we knew that Han would in the Falcon like make the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. So we'll get to that number later, but like we knew that little like Easter egg from New Hope was gonna be like they could not put that in there. If they had to put it in there, I'd have it be like this. where it is as part of the larger story, and that it feels tense and dramatic.
Yeah.
Like it should.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else, or should we move on to Savareen?
Let's move on to Savareen.
Savareen.
First of all, I will just say. Oh,
go ahead. You can go ahead.
I was gonna say. I wanted to address the thing I just said about the number, which is, of course, when Han says to that random worker on Savareen, "Just did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs," and then Chewie growls something, and he goes, "Not if you're round down, buddy." Here's why that passage is even funnier than you think it is.
He then claims to do it in less than 12 parsecs.
No, actually, there's another reason.
Oh, what's that?
This is a passage from the junior novelization of Solo.
Oh, wow.
The worker paused. Buck actually told me about this last week. Credit to Buck O'Brien. He told me about this last week before we recorded. The worker paused momentarily, stone-faced and clearly skeptical, and Chewie growled, "Actually, it was more like 13. So here's what happened, okay? I think probably Han Solo made the Kessel Run in about 12.8 parsecs or something like that.
Yeah.
It would more or less, I thought, like, the movie, I thought, it was like 12.3. And he was like, if you round down, it's 12. He intentionally chose to round 12.8 or whatever it was down to 12. And then, of course, later on by A New Hope, as you mentioned, he rounded it down again. Recall that Lando said that no one's ever made Han
Solo.
Recall that Lando said that no one's ever made the Kessel Run in less than 20 parsecs. 12.8 or whatever it was would have been plenty impressive enough. But Han fucking Solo cannot help but exaggerate and embellish an already legendary truth about him to make himself seem unnecessarily more impressive. That is peak Han Solo for me. I love it so much. He exaggerated not once, but twice. You get the feeling that he told the story so many times by the time we get to A New Hope that it's a go, we made it to 12 if you round down. And then in a few years, it'll be, we made it to 12. And then no, if you round down. And then, if you round down, we actually did less than 12. And of course, now by the time we get to A New Hope, it'll be ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parts. I'm sure that if he kept going and he didn't join the rebellion and had people to keep him honest, he'd be like, if you round down, we made it at 11 parsecs. It is the charm and power of Han Solo as a character that is just so fun. And think about in Force Awakens when Rey mistakenly says 14 parsecs, where she has an incorrect piece of information, but Han then corrects it with another incorrect piece of information.
That's at that point. At that point, he's probably said 12 so many times. Who knows if he even remembers it?
Oh, absolutely.
He doesn't even.
He's they're from sometimes I amaze even my I feel like he's convinced himself at this point that it was 12.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Power of Han Solo right there.
Yeah. I want to call your attention to one conversation or one little moment in particular that I think just exemplifies this part of the movie and the movie as a whole. So Han puts his arm around Lando. They're looking at the Falcon and he goes, "She's a hell of a ship." Cut to the Falcon lying, smoking, on fire, almost completely wrecked. Lando just goes, "I hate you." Han says, "No."
I know.
What a moment for so many reasons. First of all, Han and Lando in this moment. First off, this movie's at its best when it just lets itself be a little bit campy, a little bit pulpy, just a fun, funny adventure movie. And moments like this are what it's all about. And they still are of great significance. Also, if we're talking about inversions of classic lines showing who Han is at this time, Han's completely unfazed and takes it in stride. Or he acts completely unfazed when Leia says she loves him. Here, even though he may not want, same thing, he may not want to, but he feels the need to just go, oh, I know. He doesn't care. He's cool as Gumber.
Buck said this to me Buck said this to us last time. I'm pretty sure I edited it out because I wanted to save it for episode. But I remember him specifically saying to me, even if it wasn't a reference, like the delivery was so good, I would have loved it. But the fact that it is a reference, no, even if the line wasn't a reference, even if it was,
I see what you mean. Yeah, even if the other line didn't exist, yeah, okay.
Even if the exchange was not, if there was no "I love you, I know" before that, the delivery from both is just so good. Knowing that it is a reference to ESB is just gravy.
Absolutely, yeah.
It didn't need to be a reference, but the fact that it is just like extra on top of how funny it is. Again, how effortlessly funny this film is. And then we get to Han and Qi'ra's conversation whilst refining that coaxium. Of course, Han being the good guy.
Yeah, we talked about this so much with Buck last week. Han has this perception of who he is or who he wants to be. Qi'ra, she thinks that he can't. Qi'ra thinks that Han's not cut out for her life, for the gangster, the mob, the underground life. She says, you're the good guy. You're a sweet guy. No matter what Han tries to pretend in this movie, he has at his heart a sweet little cinnamon roll who can't really do much wrong. And Qi'ra, of course, sees that, and she's, oh, Han, I've done things you, and Dryden says, she's done things you can't understand.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting. And it's the moment that's especially telling is just Han saying, I am not the good guy. Like, he's so bewildered, but he can't really he can't
pull it off.
He's trying to convince himself.
Yeah, because I think he knows in his heart, and I think he tries so hard to deny it. But he knows that Qi'ra's right. That Qi'ra at this point knows Han better than he knows himself.
Yeah.
That I think that Qi'ra is wrong about a few things in this film, but I think that it's really interesting, and I think this is a key underlying theme in this film that doesn't get covered a lot because it is very, you have to look into it pretty hard to see it, but it's there, I believe, which is the idea that it does seem to me that every one of our main characters in this film, our main protagonists, specifically Han, Qi'ra, and Beckett, understands the nature of everyone else exponentially better than they understand themselves.
Yeah, possibly.
Han understands Beckett and Qi'ra in a way they don't understand themselves. And the same can be true, the same can be said for Beckett and Qi'ra respectively. And we'll get into why I think that later with the Sting-esque heist that's con job that's pulled at the end of the film, and where I land on that, which is, spoiler, not where I thought I'd land on it. But do we want to get on to, I think probably what's my favorite scene in this movie?
The return of Enfys Nest.
Beckett. At last we meet again.
Yeah. What do you think?
I was counting on it. Just didn't plan on it being so soon. Of course, now you got a problem, a big problem. You happen to notice that freighter down there? You know what's on it? About 30 hired guns. All I gotta do is give them the signal you're surrounded. Sorry, you do your thing. The dialogue, I think this is just a great fusion of filmmaking. I think the direction, the cinematography, that shot of, that I think was also in the trailers for this film, of Han unholstering his blaster, the excellent Cloud Rider motif from Powell here, the excellent, like one of my favorite jokes in this movie, of Han's bluff going like ridiculously so wrong that it's not even funny. And this scene for me has that inherent lovable quality that, like, there's nothing I hate about this scene. There's nothing I dislike about this scene. This scene is just so fun. it encapsulates what I love about Solo specifically.
Yeah, I think that it exemplifies Han's just one thing I love about this whole thing is Han's just absolute is bluster, his amazing unwarranted confidence to just be like, that ship is full of hired guns. And then the Falcon immediately takes off, and Nest is just like, come on, man.
Yeah.
You gotta come with something better than that.
Yeah. And I think, but that's the thing. I think it would have worked. Like, of course, if Han actually had to signal it, we don't know how that would go. But if Lando hadn't taken off at that exact moment, who knows? Like, maybe Nest would have been a little bit more scared. I don't know. Maybe, first of all, I will say this, Jacob, you will have to go to bat for me on this one because, of course, apparently this was actually discussed in leaks before Solo, but I wasn't following any leaks at that time that Solo came out. But on the way to the theater when we were watching this movie, I told Jacob, I think Enfys Nest is a woman. Remember that? Remember I told you that?
I do, yeah.
And I was hoping that would be the case, and it was the case. And I think that just the general reveal, I think the best twist in this film is that the people who we were questioning about whether or not they were bad guys, turns out, Jacob, they were bad guys.
Mm.
If you call yourself Crimson Dawn and are one of the biggest crime syndicates in the game, you might not be great people. And the idea that the Cloud Riders, even though they've been the pain in Beckett's side in this movie, have been doing the things they do. They're actually when Enfys Nest was added into Galaxy of Heroes, for example, we all expected her to be added in as dark side, but no, she's added in as light side.
Yeah.
And Enfys Nest is a good person. None of the things she does in the film before this are explicitly evil. She does not do anything evil in this movie. There is no morally questionable thing, in my opinion, that she does in this movie, or any of the Cloud Riders do in this movie. They do things that villains have done in other films, like attacking the trackers, but that's not an inherently villainous thing to do.
Yeah.
So I just find it really, I think it's a twist on what George was trying to do with the OT and Vader, where who you think was the villain the entire time was really the victim.
Yeah.
And the entire speech that Aaron Kellerman, who, by the way, Lucasfilm, I'm gonna be like Bernie. I'm once again asking for you to do more stories with Aaron Kellerman as Enfys Nest. Please, this woman is so great at that role. I love her so much, and I love the character so much. That whole speech with Enfys Nest about the horrific actions of Crimson Dawn and the fact that Han and Chewie, even though they might not have realized the extent to which they were doing this, they were not carrying out their missions for the underdog.
Yeah.
For some like criminal syndicate that was just trying to make ends meet for themselves by some less than legal means.
Yeah.
They were doing these jobs for the oppressors.
Yeah, I think that's not even I think that for people like Beckett and Han in this situation, it's not even about whether what they're doing is morally right or who they're doing it for. It really is just they want to make money. They want to be able to do what they need to do. You know, Han wants to be able to get back with Qi'ra.
But I don't think Han understood before this moment truly how evil Crimson Dawn was.
Oh no, I think he didn't. Yeah, I think that he was obviously pinching his nose and closing his eyes to drink the Kool-Aid, maybe, or just looking the other way a little bit in order to work with these people, and also didn't necessarily know. But clearly at this point in the movie, he definitely does know after talking to Enfys Nest.
He cannot. That's the thing is
and then he can't look back after that because he's on, and he is not the bad guy. He's not he's not a slimy dude the way he wants to be.
It's the thing with Qi'ra we were just talking about, where once Han knows that, he cannot. There are people, there are scoundrels in the galaxy who would be able to look at that and say, I'm still doing this anyway. Not Han. One of my favorite details from Legends, I don't know if you remember this detail, this is a Legends detail about Han in his early smuggling days, that Han would smuggle any cargo that a crime syndicate asked him to, except for one thing. Do you remember what that one thing was?
I do not.
Slaves.
Oh.
Han refused to be a slave trafficker. Han refused to smuggle enslaved beings, which I think is, he would smuggle spice, he would smuggle whatever they wanted to, but he would not himself smuggle enslaved people. And I think that is a great precursor. I think that is a great Legends counterpart to something like this, where Han might not be willing to play exactly by the book in all scenarios, but when the chips are down, he's going to make the right move. He's going to make the morally justifiable move.
Yeah. And that's who he is. Absolutely.
That's who he is. I think that the chance of Erin Kellerman, if they asked Erin Kellerman to return as Nest, again, I don't know if she'd say yes, but she was in the Willow series, also done by Lucasfilm. So she clearly at least doesn't have bad feelings for the company, which, again, I'm just hoping, please, Disney, Lucasfilm, do more with Enfys Nest. I love that character dearly, and there's so many interesting avenues you can go with her character that I think I'll talk a little bit more about as we proceed on with this episode and talking more about Solo and her and Nest's story in this arc. But I love this character, except for when she gains ridiculous stacks of bonus protection, and you just are stonewalled.
Yeah, she's a pain in Galaxy of Heroes.
It was crazy. I remember everybody like, this side character from Solo is now one of the best characters in Galaxy Heroes somehow.
Go figure.
And honestly, I wouldn't give it to any other character. I would not give it to any other character. All right, so yeah, Jacob, actually, I want to know what you thought about this scene in general with Nest and.
I thought it was cool to see the other side of these characters and the expectations that have been set up. Or the Thorne and Beckett side, they were just going to be they were also going to be marauders, just out for just a rival gang, a rival criminal syndicate, whatever. But really, it's something deeper. So I thought that was cool. But I didn't have as many thoughts as you did. So I'm going to cede the floor to you here, so you can get your Nest agenda out of the way as we try to.
No, that was it for me and Nest. I'll just add the fantastic line: "We're not marauders, we're allies, and the war has just begun."
This is a fun line, yeah.
Which is I think it's a callback a little bit. Again, might not have been intentional, but it reminds me a lot of the speech Luke gives at the end of Last Jedi. The war is just beginning. I will not be the last Jedi, which came out as a few months before this movie did. It's TLJ and Solo don't have a lot of links between each other just by the different areas they are covering, but there are these little thematic links because TLJ does deal a lot, especially with Kylo and Luke a little bit, with the memory of Han Solo and how he was and how they're going to choose to remember this infamous character. And I think that I like that little callback there. That's what I'll say. I like that little callback right there. All right, so let's talk about the big plot point, the big development in the plot in this specific
twists just keep coming. This is a crazy final 20 minutes.
The final, this part with the fake coaxium and all that kind of stuff. Originally, I was not crazy about this part. Originally, I thought that the twists were just too confusing to keep track of, and that it wasn't properly explained enough. And there were parts where I was wondering if Han even really knew what he was doing and stuff like that. But I think I can map up pretty clear what happened and what Han's plan was. Can I present my analysis to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it was pretty clear as I was watching it, but if you feel that would be helpful, then by all means.
In my interpretation of it, Han, of course, approaches Beckett with the conversation, but he doesn't tell Beckett all of the plan. I think he tells Beckett, we're going to put fake coaxium and give to Dryden and give the rest to Nest, knowing that that Beckett is likely to betray him. And then, as he's doing that, he gives the real coaxium to the Cloud Riders. And then Beckett, just as he believes, that's why Han says in that scene, I was listening to what you said too. You said people are predictable, and you're no exception. Because Beckett isn't. Because Han knew that Beckett would act in his own self-interest at the end of the day. And so then what Han did, of course, was he arranged the whole double crossing with Nest and the Cloud Riders. And I also think he knew, or he was trusting, and maybe he had a little too much trust in Qi'ra, though I don't think so, that Qi'ra would remain the girl he knew on Corellia and wouldn't sell him out to Crimson Dawn and Ryan, which paid off for him. Now, I don't know if he was expecting Beckett to switch sides again. Maybe he did, because again, it was in his own self-interest. Maybe he didn't, but yeah, and I don't know what he expected to happen to Dryden. I think that maybe that was one of the places where Han was like, yeah, and we'll improvise, which is something that Han says probably way too much. And yeah, I thought the plan could have been explained afterwards, maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, probably.
But that's just me.
I thought it was pretty good overall. I thought the twists were thrilling. I did not remember some of the from before. I did not remember some of this from when I last watched it, and maybe I think the last time was 2019. So it has been quite a while. And I was thrilled by all the twists and turns. I thought it was just awesome, especially when Han totally turns the tables on Dryden Voss. I thought that part was amazing, and the way that it's woven in with the emotional intensity and questions that Qi'ra and Han are trying to answer for themselves. I think it's quite well done. I enjoyed it.
Me as well. I think that the plan was goofy and fun, and I will constantly compare this ending heist because it does feel very similar to me to the ending of the great 1970s film The Sting, which I'm sure had some inspiration for this film. I'm just sure of it. It's a classic con man heist film, and it seems like something that the Kasdans would have drawn on for this film. And I think I think it could have been executed maybe a little bit better, but I think the overall plan was a lot better than I remembered, and a lot more fun and Han Solo than I would have remembered. I don't really understand why, maybe you can help me with this one. I don't really understand why Han didn't leave with Chewie and Beckett with the coaxium instead of staying with Qi'ra and that kind of stuff. Like, maybe he truly thought Qi'ra was going to go with him, but I don't know. I would have hightailed it out of there.
I think he did. I think he absolutely thought, based on his reaction, I think he absolutely thought that. I think he absolutely thought that Qi'ra was going to go with him. And in his mind, I think he had every reason to, based on their conversations. And I think that's just for him, just a dose of, this is the reality of the life that Qi'ra has maybe chosen a little bit, but maybe also just been forced into by circumstance, like she says, doing what it takes to survive.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. But what about this final fight? Here's my hot take about this final fight. This final fight feels like the Kasdans wanted a lightsaber duel, but they couldn't have a lightsaber duel, so they did like a lightsaber duel without lightsabers.
Yeah, I thought it was certainly fun, and it was very satisfying to finally see.
I thought it was fine. Don't get me wrong.
Take down Dryden.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The conclusion of the fight was good. I just thought the fight in general felt to me like, shit, we have to do something other than a lightsaber duel. So we'll just do a lightsaber duel without lightsabers.
Yeah, they clearly wanted to do something that maybe wasn't just a shootout. A little different from that, which I can appreciate.
And especially on the back of Last Jedi specifically for me, because I feel like the conversation between Qi'ra and Dryden at the very end, right before Qi'ra kills him, is extremely similar to the conversation between Snoke and Kylo right before Kylo kills him in The Last Jedi, which I think, in my opinion, The Last Jedi did way better. And I remember specifically in the theater, I literally said out loud, I'm like, and kills his true enemy. It felt a little bit like, okay, I know what you're going to do here. Again, it was just because of the proximity to Last Jedi, but I don't know. That's just my opinion about that. But yeah, Qi'ra killing Dryden is really interesting, and I think it serves as a really nice wrap up to her very complicated character arc in this story of constantly having to try and figure out her own path, not prescribed by anybody else, not Han, not Dryden, just for herself.
Yeah, absolutely.
That finally Qi'ra has at the beginning of this, at the end of this movie, something that she's been searching for her entire life, which is agency. And of course, we return to her story in the trilogy of comics that Charles Soule wrote for her, but I'm hoping to see her in more follow-up stories to Solo in the future. Jacob, do we want to get to this part of the movie? I don't, but we have to.
The Maul reveal. You gave it away by saying you don't want to. Look, I thought that this was man, I thought that this was the most unnecessary thing ever. I love the little Duel of Fates motif, sure, but besides that, what are we doing here? Why? This movie's already so long. There's already so much going on, especially in this final closing 20-25 minutes, this closing act. We just simply don't need this.
Jacob, let me ask you something.
Confuse the hell out of general audiences as well, lest we forget.
Let me ask you something, Jacob, okay?
Okay.
Who is the main Crimson Dawn boss? What if I told you it was Darth Maul?
Know this. This simply.
Let me explain something to you.
We just didn't.
The amount of vitriol I have for this specific thing is probably, other than Han's name, getting his name earlier in this film, probably the worst I feel about any story decision in any Star Wars movie. And that is not an exaggeration. It is not a secret my incredible hatred of Darth Maul as a character on this show. I've made that no secret. And I genuinely felt like, I remember specifically watching this in the theater for the first time, and I thought that that Solo as a film had exceeded my expectations as a film. And then Darth Maul showed up. It was like, here's something else. And this is true. I'm gonna tell you something that doesn't sound true, but I'm telling you this is 100% true, okay? Darth Maul didn't have to be the guy at the end. John Kasdan was presented a list of different options of who, like from the story group, of who it could be.
There didn't have to be that scene at all, in my opinion.
No, I know, but if there was that scene, it did not have to. I'm not saying I like putting back the validity of the scene itself, which I generally agree with you.
Yeah, sure.
That the person at the end of that scene didn't even have to be Darth Maul.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally.
Kasdan was presented a list. We know this from behind the scenes stuff, and he voluntarily chose Maul.
Interesting.
And again, y'all don't have to listen to a more of my spewing of my hatred for Maul's return. But yeah, and also, of course, the other elephant in the room for this scene, which I'm glad you brought up before I did, because again, it's extremely important, which is the idea about general audiences. Look, there's been a lot of talk about how you treat pre-existing characters in Star Wars. And I think most Star Wars stuff has treated pre-existing characters from other media pretty well, actually. But the number of people, I remember hearing from Alex Damon on Star Wars Explained, and I remember him saying that his dad asked him in the theater, wait, I thought Darth Maul died. And of course he did. He hadn't seen the 7th-season animated show that no one knew that they had to watch before going into this movie.
Yeah, it was a Marvel moment for sure. It was a big Marvel moment.
And I think legitimately virtually every pre-existing character interpolation after this, in The Rise of Skywalker, in all of the Grogu saga, has been better than Solo in this regard. I think it's handled pre-existing characters better than this. And yeah, Darth Maul, just knowing that, and it was only mentioned 2 times and previously in the movie in passing, basically, oh, I report to someone else. Yeah, it's just, I don't like to go off about how much I hate things in Star Wars, but genuinely, I genuinely hate this moment. I genuinely do not like this moment. And it's just, is it nice hearing Duel of the Fates again? Sure, but I was not expecting, there's no reason for us to hear Duel of the Fates in the Han Solo movie. There just isn't.
That was the one good part of the scene, I thought, was a little Duel of the Fates hit. That was just excellent.
It's good.
I thought that was so much fun.
It was good, don't get me wrong, but then I just go to thinking about why it's in the scene at all, and then it just crumbles for me.
Yeah, fair enough. This whole thing just, I completely agree with you. For me, it's just, why?
Yeah.
I think it's a symptom of the major problem with this movie. It just, there's times when it just tries to take on too much. It just suffers from, I think, literally time and story-wise, and also I think a little bit thematically as well, and in some more intangible ways. It just suffers from a sense of bloat at times. And this just exemplifies that, I think.
Yeah. I also think, we'll get to this a little bit later, but I also think there was an expectation with this film. And I think that Lucasfilm has gone away from this now, which I think is a wise thing to do. There was an expectation of this film that substantial follow-up would be gone. That this was not going to be a standalone story, that this was going to be a story that stood apart from the main Skywalker saga, but that carried on into future stories.
Yeah.
And then Lucasfilm absolutely screwed the pooch on marketing for this film, or Disney mostly screwed the pooch on marketing for this film. Bob Iger has admitted that several times, that they
timing as well. The timing of the release was very problematic.
It was undermarketed, and then it was released. And then it was released right after
4 months after a main trilogy movie. That's not going to work.
6 months after a main trilogy movie, and that wasn't the biggest problem with the film's release time, honestly, for me. It was the fact that it was released after what was at that point the highest grossing, like weeks after the highest grossing film of all time. At that point, Avengers: Infinity War.
Yeah, that as well.
And so
stiff competition.
Yeah, so
Avengers and the Last Jedi.
Yeah, but like Avengers: Infinity War, it was like that was when the MCU was
Endgame.
like on.
No, Infinity War. My bad.
No, it was Infinity War.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. It was Infinity War. I think you're wrong for a sec. It was Infinity War.
Yeah, Infinity War was like, especially like Infinity War in the time after between Infinity War and Endgame. I feel like that was when the MCU had its peak popularity. And Star Wars was going through a little bit of something with the incredibly divisive fan response to The Last Jedi. And the Solo was like, I don't know how much Solo was impacted by negative backlash towards The Last Jedi. I think it's less than a lot of TLJ haters think it is, honestly. But I do think it's not an insubstantial thing. And so that was already going to have, like, attributed, it feels like a perfect storm of terrible conditions. Just like how Disney recently released The Marvels in a perfect storm of awful conditions.
Yeah.
Where the anti-woke backlash, which is just stupid and all that shit, and the fact that it's 3 women leading the film, and that they weren't allowed to promote it for most of this thing because of the writer's strike, because of the SAG strike, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, whole bunch of stuff. Yeah.
A whole bunch of external stuff. Like, it should be no surprise to anybody that the Marvels did as badly as it did because of all the external circumstances that made it crash and burn like that. Honestly, I want to jump to this moment. This might be a hot take. I'm not crazy about this. I'm not crazy about this Beckett shootout with Han.
You're not? Why not?
I just feel like it's unnecessary. I feel like Beckett needed to die, and they needed some way to do that.
Yeah.
And the entire scene, thank God they don't go this route, but the entire scene was basically to make a Han shoots first joke.
I don't think it's just that at all. I don't think it's about the joke at all, actually. I would just say that
or not the joke exactly.
This is an example of I understand what you mean, like that, setting that precedent. But I think this is just an example of showing we know who Han is, but also we're seeing who he can be and how he becomes the person that, like the Han at the beginning of, I guess, Han, and we see him with his willingness to actually shoot Beckett when he sees that Beckett's going for his gun. And then the fact that we have all this talk about paying attention to the right thing, paying attention to the wrong thing, all the back and forth throughout the movie. And then Han actually sees what Beckett's doing, what he's going for. He prevents it completely by shooting him. I think that just shows where he's at and where he's going with where he's willing now to kill a man. And not just that he's willing to, but that the fact that he just does it in order to survive, not just in order to survive, but just like that, real fast. And then Han in A New Hope would have walked away, said something sly. He wouldn't have gone over and held Beckett as he died. I think it's just a moment where we're seeing kind of the evolution of Han, I would say.
Yeah, I get that. It's like there's just some mechanical stuff, like why Beckett wanted to kill Han in the first place.
Yeah, I guess as well. Yeah, I think we can guess, but
yeah,
it is a bit clunky, I'll admit.
But here's something that isn't clunky that I do love, and this is not from the film itself, but it's expanded upon in the novelization. God bless Mur Lafferty. This is the thing that Buck was telling us about last time. Remember in the last recording?
Yeah.
The epilogue of the novelization. You want me to reveal it to you now?
Go for it. Yeah.
In the epilogue of Solo: Star Wars Story, we catch up of the novelization by Mur Lafferty. We catch up back with Enfys Nest, actually. And we see her with the coaxium that Han and Chewie gave her. And she makes a delivery of that coaxium to an older late 30s, early 40s man and a young girl that he adopted. That man was named Saw Gerrera. And the young girl, of course, is a young Jyn Erso. So when Nest was talking about a rebellion, she wasn't just talking figuratively. She was doing stuff with the partisans. She was doing stuff, I'm sure, with other rebel groups. The Han, in some way, indirectly impacted the life of a young Jyn Erso, connecting the two Star Wars spin-off films at the time to each other in a very tangible way.
Yeah, totally.
That's the epilogue of Solo, of the novelization, which I think is really just a fantastic touch, and I thank Buck for mentioning it to me last time. Do you have anything else, or should we get to the final game?
Final game of Sabacc. We got to talk about it. Out on, where do they find them? Out on Numidian Prime.
Numidian Prime, Numidian Prime, which was revealed first off by, because that was never said in the film or in any of the reference books. It was actually some sleuthing done by another shout out to Alex Damon of Star Wars Explained. He was the one who figured it out.
Nice.
That was on Numidian Prime. This is just fun. This is just a fun way to end off the film. Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah, it is a fun one. I have to say, you really have to feel for Lando here. His expression when he sees Han walking, like his ship was almost destroyed. L3 got killed. He got injured. He clearly just wants nothing to do with any of them. He's licking his wounds. He's cooling his heels. He's getting his feet back under him. He's having fun. And then all of a sudden, in they walk again. Just, yeah, you gotta.
And Han's mad at him for some reason.
Yeah, you have to feel for him in that situation. That does kind of suck for him.
Yeah, no, Lando, despite everything, gets fucking screwed in this scenario. Han figures out his tricks, which I think Lando figured that nobody was going to figure out.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, I think, again, Alden Ehrenreich does such a great job in this film. The cadence that he delivers the phrase "little green Psylop" is fantastic. You knew that Han had spent hours, if not days, preparing for that exact moment. And it was a really tangible thing. That sense of, guess what, motherfucker? I beat you at your own game.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I did what no one else before was able to do to you.
Yeah. You picked his pocket.
Yeah.
You got the card.
Lando may have played the Han, but Han played the long con.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a fun way to end off this film. And yeah, I think that's going to end off our coverage of this episode. What do you think of this chunk of Solo and our coverage of Solo generally? What did you think of this film as a whole, Jacob? Not this film as a whole. What did you think of this
chunk as a whole? I thought it was a worthy ending, a great ending, even in many ways, to a very fun and interesting film, one that I have grown to appreciate more and more. I do think it is emblematic of the film as a whole, where, moments like Maul, the flaws of this section are really the flaws of the whole thing. And also, I think it does a good job of wrapping things up, though. It does. And yeah, we'll get more into the film overall in our retrospective, but I thought this was really solid and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And obviously the thrilling twists and everything that happened. This was a jam-packed session.
Yes.
A jam-packed segment. Sorry. And we sure did it justice. A long session.
We definitely did. You can say that again. I'm very much with Jacob here. I think that there's some fantastic stuff in this segment. There's some stuff I don't love in the segment, but mostly it's just fantastic action, fantastic Star Wars, goofy, fun adventure. A lot of great acting, a lot of great writing, a lot of great cinematography, some story decisions that I don't agree with that we talked about already. But overall, just a really fun ending to this film that is really, of course, it has those deeper themes that we've covered. Of course, it has those deeper character moments, but it's also just fun. But it's also just a Star Wars adventure. And I think that some fans are reluctant to let Star Wars projects be that and appreciating, and they have trouble with appreciating Star Wars projects in different media for instead of what they are, for what they want them to be. But looking at this film for not what it could be or what it should be according to somebody else, but what it is, it's fun. It's good.
I like it for what it is. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is going to be it for this episode. Next week, of course, we are going to be doing our retrospective episode. And then after that, we are going to be taking a little bit of a break for In a Galaxy, but we'll be returning more in late December. We'll tell you our plans for future In a Galaxy on the next episode. In the meantime, though, you can follow us on Twitter, on everywhere, at In a Galaxy Pod, Twitter, Instagram, all the socials, Blue Sky, Threads. You can listen to us on Anchor, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'll be there. If we're not, email us, slbinagaxy@gmail.com, along with any questions or fun facts or trivia you want to share with us. We love getting stuff from listeners that you can follow my personal everything at my Linktree, linktr.e/_OchiFan327, where I have all the links to my personal Twitter, my personal social media, as well as Epic Confrontations, our spinoff show. And I think there's nothing else. May the Force be with you. Always.